thought, obviously, we're in a different setting. I have a more visual look right now. And actually, it's depending on where you're at. You might be on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcast, or you might be on YouTube or even IGTV if I'm feeling confident. But hey y'all, welcome. Thank you so much for clicking. My name is Saren and you're listening to Sarandippity. This is a podcast, but I decided to do a visual episode because the issue we're talking about today, I think I can explain it better with more visuals, and I also wanted to put my sources on the screen instead of having to state them all. So just making my life easier. If you've never heard of this podcast, this is a podcast where through conversation, discussion, and questioning, we confront the constructs of our world, and by doing so, we create our own serendipity. So without further ado, let's get into today's, dang, I always stutter on that. Let's get into today's episode. So the topic for today is inspired by, yes, a clubhouse room, and don't judge me. But in this clubhouse room, they were talking about how the strong Black woman narrative is very dangerous, how it affects Black women negatively, and it can be very toxic. And I was listening to this and I was like, yes, y'all hear me. So I kind of wanted to bring the conversation here and make it easier to understand, because I think a lot of people say this with good intentions, not realizing the danger that it holds. So we're gonna dissect this idea of the strong Black woman. So it's very common to hear the idea that Black women are superheroes, whether we're talking politically, civically, or even culturally. Black women are known for being progressive and most of all, informed. This progressiveness is very unique within Black women because it transcends class and even privilege. You see rich and poor and educated and uneducated Black women always being known as trendsetters and spearheaders, often creating the culture that we all subscribe to and creating the changes that we all push for. So knowing that, and knowing that Black women often are the superheroes of our world, it brings me to the question, who is gonna save us? If Black women are the superheroes of our world, who is going to save Black women? So in this episode, we're going to be looking at that question by discussing the strong Black woman trope. And oftentimes the strong Black woman trope is meant as a compliment. It's meant to be uplifting, but we're going to look at how it can be toxic when perpetuated onto Black women. So the best way to start by doing this is looking at what the trope means. The strong Black woman is really the ideal of Black womanhood. To be strong, to be resilient. Like when we visualize what this is, the strong Black woman, she is known for being just nurturing, just selfless, independent, and most of all, she is known for being resilient, like extremely resilient. She's been through hell and back. She's really got it out the mud, or whatever you want to say. And even with all of that, she still continues to uplift the people around her, taking care of everyone before she takes care of herself. So this is something we've heard before. It's very common that we hear about it. And in many ways, it's a very positive stereotype, especially compared to the other stereotypes that are perpetuated onto Black women. When we see this woman, unlike the mammy, she's independent and she doesn't exist simply to serve a white family. She's moral, so unlike the Jezebel, she doesn't exist to be just animalistically sexual and predatory. And unlike the angry Black woman, which this is probably the most different, she is nurturing and resilient. So she doesn't complain and she doesn't take her anger on people around her. She sucks it up and does what she has to do. In many ways, actually, the strong Black woman trope was created by Black women. Women like Nanny Helen Burroughs, Coretta Scott King, Fannie Lou Hamer, Ruth Ellis, which if you haven't heard of some of those women, go ahead and listen to my last episode where I talked about Black women in history. But either way, these are Black women who are the living embodiment, or were the living embodiment of what it meant to be a strong Black woman. So why is it a bad thing? Why am I questioning it? Well, first of all, I like to question things. Y'all know this if you listen to this podcast. But second of all, I want to look at this because because although it might be partly true, and this might be biased to say, but Black women are often the backbone of not just their families, of their communities, of our society, really, if we really want to get into it. The issue is within the idea of what it means to be a human being, and even more so, what it means to be a woman. Black women, specifically in the Western world, have a different experience than any other race of women. Black women were brought here to be enslaved, so at the foundation of the existence of Black women in the Western world is capital, is how much you can work. I'm actually reading a book, and this is a book by Patricia Hill Collins, and it's called Black Feminist Thought, and it kind of looks at the intersection of blackness and womanhood and just other intersecting ideas, but she describes it as, in essence, their forced incorporation into a capitalist political economy as slaves meant the West African woman became economically exploited, politically powerless units of labor. So in layman's terms, Black women now worldwide, due to European colonization and the transatlantic slave trade, became tied to the amount of work they did and the amount of money they made for white slave owners. This is obviously a very problematic way to be described and to be treated. This existence for Black women completely strips Black women of being a woman. When we look at what is the center of womanhood, what does it mean to be a woman, is femininity. Being feminine, being delicate. And obviously, historically, Black women have been completely stripped of their femininity because people needed a way, Europeans, white people, they needed a way to justify the oppression that was being forced onto Black women. So Black women weren't seen as women, and obviously that has a very long-lasting effect. So how does that relate to the strong Black woman trope? How does that relate to what we're talking about? Well, first we have to look at it in how are strong Black women portrayed in media. So earlier I said that the strong Black woman trope was created by Black women, which is true. But in media, the strong Black woman is defined and written by white men. Yeah. The strong Black woman is written and defined by white men. So due to that, many times when this character is portrayed, they're not the protagonist. And on top of that, they really serve to kind of build up a white character, to build them up, to let them flourish. And that is problematic, very much problematic. So because of this, at its worst portrayal, the strong Black woman becomes a way to justify to mostly white audiences a complacency to oppression, because Black women are strong enough to take it. Black women are strong, so why should I really worry about what they're going through? That is toxic. That is, in essence, extremely toxic. And I think I'm going a little bit off on a tangent, but like, Black women are often shown in shows struggling in some way, whether it's being a single mother or whether it's being poor or whatever. In any different way, Black women are often shown in struggle. So because of this, we see that the strong Black woman trope goes from a way to empower Black women to a way to exploit them. Obviously, this portrayal in media is very significant because we know media controls how we perceive our world. It creates an implicit bias. So unconsciously, a lot of us start to perpetuate these very inhumane perceptions of Black women due to what we see in the media. And this is very, very, very dangerous. But on the other side of that is also the way that Black women perceive themselves. How do Black women see themselves due to this trope? And this is known as SelfConcept. SelfConcept is how we define our personal and social characteristics such as race and disability and our self-esteem. Well, seeing that the strong Black woman is the ideal for Black women put onto them by society, Black women closely tie their worth to their strength and to their work. And that just makes it even more dangerous. To show you a way that this is perpetuated very toxically, let's talk about ableism. So if you don't know what ableism is, in the Webster Dictionary, it's described as a discrimination or prejudice against individuals who are disabled. In a capitalistic society, big ass word, I mean, big old word. In a capitalistic society, your worth is very much tied to how productive you are or how able-bodied you are perceived to be. And to describe what ableism looks like in our society, we have a very strict set of standards to describe what is viewed as able-bodied. And everything is curtailed or personalized to that experience. So when you're outside of that, when you're not necessarily able-bodied based on society standards, you have no way to integrate into society in the same way, because there's no institutions, there's no infrastructure to allow you to exist in the same equal way that other people do. So disabled people are often treated as second-class citizens, and we allow it. We allow it. I'll have to talk about ableism another day. But for Black women, obviously we see that Black women are closely tied to their ability to work. So being disabled carries an even heavier burden on Black women. Black women even begin to internalize this ableism because they're so used to tying their self-worth to their ability to be productive members of society. And I say productive in quotes. So going off of that, Angel Love Miles kind of puts this into words in a very interesting way, and I really like this quote. They said, "In this way, the strong Black woman trope has a material reality that is perpetuated not only through Black cultural expectations, but also through institutional structures that affect one's access to resource and life chances." And that is not the only way that this is perpetuated institutionally. When we look at the workforce and the labor force, Black women are not only subject to a gender pay gap, but also to a racial pay gap, meaning that Black women are paid less than both their women and male co-workers. And this gets even harder for disabled Black women. And really getting into it, Black women have always been expected to work even more than any other group of women, and have some of the highest, actually the highest rate of worker participation in terms of all women, but still are paid less than all other women. Outside of the labor force, we see this perpetuated largely through medical racism. And I think you've all heard of this, but Black nurses or Black people are perceived very dangerously by nurses. Many nurses still subscribe to the belief that Black people do not experience pain in the same way as their white counterparts, and they believe that Black people have thicker skin. So because of that, we see a higher Black maternal mortality rate, and even see that Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to suffer from a severe disability resulting from childbirth than white women. Black women historically have been the subjects of non-consensual scientific experiments, and these experiments are to this day very consequential. We talk about Henrietta Lacks. Like, these are things that have changed the history of our world. So when we know all that, we can see that the strong Black woman trope isn't just toxic in a cultural level, it is literally being perpetuated through our institutions, and Black women are dying because of it. It's not a little thing. Like, Black women are being neglected because of this issue. So at the beginning of this episode, I asked, if Black women are the superheroes of our world, who is going to save us? Who is going to save Black women? And as y'all can see, I don't know. We have not found anyone in this scheme who was there to protect the Black women. But honestly, when I look at the strong Black woman trope, I don't see it as a completely bad thing. I think it's so important that Black women find a way to empower themselves and find a way to break out of these controlling stereotypes that are already put onto us. But the issue isn't that this stereotype or this trope wasn't made in good intention. Of course it's made with good intention. But because we live in a world where Black women aren't seen for their humanity or for the fact that they're human beings, it becomes toxic and dangerous. And that is just the sad truth of it all. So very much sad, very hurtful. Of course, I'm all about the solutions. Like, we can't just talk about the issue and not talk about the solution. Well, the solution, let me think. Well, I guess we could revolutionize, take down the patriarchy and the racist institutions that run our country, redistribute wealth from the 1% back to the people who actually make them the money. But y'all know we in a pandemic. Not much we can do. To be more realistic, to be more realistic about what we can do, It's hard to say. It's very hard to say, but I will say representation is very important. I'm gonna do an episode about representation later on because this needs to be talked about, representation. But I think representation for Black women is very important because with this strong Black woman trope, we've seen this trope be portrayed very positively. We see Annalise Keating's. She's a lawyer. No, she's not a wife. Well, she's been through a lot, but Annalise Keating, we see her, we respect her. But when it's portrayed well, it's always done by a Black woman. It's always done by the Issas, by the Regina Kings, by the Marsai Martins. It's never done by other people. So Black women need to be in the forefront of these portrayals and be the ones that define what the strong Black woman is. Other than that, from a small scale, we can just work on how we treat Black women in our day-to-day interactions. I don't know, maybe, I guess, like, be cognizant of how you treat Black women, because I don't think a lot of y'all recognize like kind of the negative ways that Black women are treated, whether it's a friend or it's a family member, your mom, your auntie, your sister, your cousin, your daughter, your grandma. Like, do a better job at protecting and loving Black women. And when I say this, y'all, I don't mean on Twitter for Twitter likes. I don't mean for retweets and follows. I mean genuinely love and protect Black women in real life. Okay? Black women don't always have to be the butt of the joke. I promise. There's other ways to be funny. But other than that, we need to recognize that hardworking Black women are human beings. And also recognize this. Black women should not have to be super women or superhuman to get your respect. Black women don't have to be the Beyoncés or the Michelles or the Kamalas or whatever, whoever you look up to as a Black woman. Black women shouldn't have to aspire to all that to be respected. It should be inherent that Black women are respected for being human beings, for existing, for being there. Just like every other person on this earth, really, But yeah, just do a better job, all of us, including me. Like, treat your mom better, take your mom out. Whatever, just treat Black women around you better. And for Black women, so much love to you. You are not a burden, and it is okay to be a human being. Never feel bad for being a human being. Black women, you deserve to be saved instead of always doing the saving. So take time for yourself. Don't always feel like you have to carry all of the weight, and that's part of you, just in one way, taking care of yourself to fight this stereotype. So that's the end of this episode. I hope you all enjoyed it. It was very fun researching this, and there's so much I wanted to put in here, but y'all know there's just too much. So of course I'm going to continue talking about these issues. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe or follow depending on what platform you're listening on. Make sure you go and follow the Instagram at SerendipityPod, and I made a Twitter. It's at SerendipityPod as well. I'm going to be more active with the social media. Yeah, I'm a student, so gotta be about my business. But I hope y'all enjoy this episode. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see y'all next week. Bye.